Good afternoon. I was kind of hoping to go out on the stage also under the Star Wars theme song, but I guess this music will also do. A very good afternoon to you all. Thank you so much for the China Daily, for the Tianjin leadership, to all of you for giving us this opportunity to share a little bit our thoughts on why AI is such an important element in what we call the fourth industrial revolution. I'll talk a little bit about the context, because we will have fantastic experts speaking after me. You will have policy practitioners. You will have people that actually build AI systems and natural language processing capabilities that they will be explained to you a little bit later. You have international experts that will talk about the importance of AI at the international stage. But what I wanted to do is to put it all a little bit in the context and explain to you why it is important. But let me start with a little introduction. I have a great privilege of working for the World Economic Forum. It's an international organization for public-private cooperation that started in 1971 with a very simple thing. It was a book written by our founder, Professor Klaus Schwab, that gave us an so-called intellectual left leg for about 50 years. And that book really just said that corporate managers have to take into account all the stakeholders, not just the shareholders, but the labor, society, government, environment, into their corporate planning and corporate decision-making. And in only this way, we will build a society that is better. As I said, that provided us with intellectual standing for about 40 years. And today, we're an organization of about 800 people coming from 80 countries, highly dedicated, highly educated, highly motivated. But the real impact of our work is done through the communities. I should mention that we have been extremely privileged to have really fantastic partnership with Tianjin government, where we come here every second year for our summer Davos. So Tianjin is very familiar with the communities that we build. And those communities are industry leaders across the industries as well as interests. Those are government officials, academia, young global leaders, global shapers, technology pioneers, cultural leaders, and so on and so forth. And it's through those communities and by providing them with what we call platforms and operating system for global cooperation, through those communities we achieve the impact and deliver on our mission of working towards a better future. Now, I mentioned that we're turning about 50 soon, and a few years back, we finally got our right intellectual leg. Another book was written by our founder, called this time The Fourth Industrial Revolution, in which he really articulated the unprecedented scale and speed of change. And I'll explain to you what I mean by the Fourth Industrial Revolution in a minute. But it's all about the speed of change, of biological, physical, and cyber worlds merging together. Now, why? The question is always asked, why the fourth industrial revolution? The first industrial revolution was obviously happening in late 1800s in the UK, in other countries in Europe, then the United States. And it was all about mechanization. Steam engine, mechanization of production, allowed us to produce more with less, to become more competitive, more efficient. The second industrial revolution happened around early 1900s, where everything was about electrification. Electrification of production, of consumption, of transport. So we did things faster, better, at bigger scale. The third industrial revolution, in our review, came around 1960s, 70s, where semiconductors were becoming mainstream. So it was all about computerization of industry, public service, PCs everywhere. But now, we think that we reached a stage where all this technology build upon each other to produce the fourth industrial revolution, which to a large extent is AI-driven. So if the first one was about mechanization, the second was about electrification, the third about computerization, you could say that the fourth one is about AIization of everything. Not a day passes by without us reading a headline that AI was used, or by AI or through AI, some wonderful achievement has been achieved. The scientists studied human genome, or deep space, or deep ocean through AI. Or the industry optimized the production, banks understand their customers better, and so on and so forth through AI. It makes me sometimes wonder, and you know that many people now say, actually, in the industry, that AI is more important than electricity. So it makes me sometimes wonder whether there were some headlines during the second industrial revolution that said that factory workers achieved fantastic output through electrification. Citizens now can iron shirts utilizing electric-enabled tools. Or we now all can enjoy tea, coffee made by electrical kettles. I think we always, as human race, get very excited about technology short-term, but always underestimate the impact technology has long-term. And that's why we are really trying to say that there is a paradigm shift. When we talk about the fourth industrial revolution, we need to take into account not only fantastic opportunity it offers, but also some of the challenges that this technology can help us solve. We now live in an interconnected system of systems, and disruption is not confined to a single industry, country, or region. The fourth industrial revolution technologies build upon each other and transcend traditional ones. They allow us to create value that was not possible before, but also create some of the risks that we'll need to address. It disrupts certain social and business norms. It challenges rules and conventions of how we conduct business. What we need to do is we need to understand in a very holistic way, and this is a very simple transformation map that has been created, but you will see how complex it is, where everything is interconnected. Now we're just starting to understand the systemic impact of this technology, but it's extremely important, and I think China is doing a great deal of effort to make sure that we are not repeating mistakes that were done in the previous industrial revolutions. And we are addressing the inequality, the gaps that exist or could potentially exist due to the network effect that these technologies create. Now, what I wanted to talk to you about a little bit is about the theme of this year's Davos meeting, which was Globalization 4.0, shaping a global architecture in the age of the fourth industrial revolution. Why? Because it picks up on two important themes that we think every leader, everybody, including students in this room, will have to deal with at a certain stage of their lives. One is obviously the fourth industrial revolution, which I have already described. The second one is the fact that our conventional global cooperation architecture is significantly challenged. And therefore, we also believe we're entering the age of Globalization 4.0. Our global risk report, every year we publish global risk reports. So last year's edition already argued that geopolitics has become not only multipolar, it became multi-conceptual. Achieving consensus on the global stage is becoming more and more difficult. Cyberspace, outer space, environment, trade, all becoming difficult areas for countries to agree on. In inter-countries and intra-countries, dialogue is absolutely key for the success. To a large extent, it's driven by technological disruptions. The rapid development of technologies, they're just disrupting traditional intergovernment affairs, the way it's conducted. Therefore, Globalization 4.0 represents fundamental change in the global economy that is reshaping companies, countries, and communities at unprecedented speed and scale. These changes are driven by environmental challenges, regional competition, economic disparities, and, as I said, technological disruptions. Now, why Globalization 4.0? You will notice as students of history that the early globalization, Globalization 1.0, goes all the way back to the Silk Road and an early attempts by humans to connect with each other, to trade, to exchange ideas. The second wave of globalization came and is tied very closely to the first industrial revolution, when railroads and all the things that came after, telephone, telegraph, allowed us to communicate better, allowed us to trade with each other, spurred the age of mass consumption, mass production, mass transportation. That era merged into Globalization 3.0 around right after World War II, where a lot of institutions that we know today have been created. The United Nations, IMF, World Bank, regional development banks, all have seen the era, or helped spur the era, of economic development and to a certain extent, international security. Those institutions are now under tremendous stress that is coming from different directions. And therefore, we think we're entering the age of Globalization 4.0. Now, as we enter that stage, we need to take again into account all the mistakes, all the lessons that have been done in the previous ones, and make sure that this wave of globalization is three things, guaranteeing three things. It has to be sustainable. We only have one planet. We absolutely need to ensure that environmental degradation stops and reverses as soon as possible around the world. Second is that it has to be inclusive. The economic changes that globalization have always seen, there will always be the questions that we need to ask. Who gains, who loses, and who we are? And this time around, because of the technologies that are driving the fourth industrial revolution, that in turn drives the Globalization 4.0, we really need to sometimes even ask the question, who are we? We need to ensure that the first industrial revolution and the benefits of it are distributed equally. We need to make sure that it's inclusive and participatory and collaborative. And then finally, we need to make sure that it's human-centric and human-led. Now, it is our strong belief at the World Economic Forum that the time has passed where we could address one problem at a time. We could deal with symptoms of a problem, but now we just don't have the time to deal with that. Therefore, we argue for a platform and system leadership approach that helps us build an operational system for international governance that will help us build a better Globalization 4.0. Now, a more inclusive system will be more sustainable and more resilient, that will be fueling continued growth. But it will require what we call Leadership 4.0, because it will require different type of skills, different type of mentality that is more collaborative, more participatory. Leadership 4.0 requires an understanding how new champions are gaining economic influence that can be disruptive and constructive in different settings. How can platform strategies and system leadership that are key business concepts in today's world are sweeping technological changes that are bringing the fourth industrial revolution? These dialogues occur on multiple platforms across many events, but one of the events I wanted to point out is obviously this one, the China Daily, which pushes this topic of AI and AI governance significantly. But I also wanted to point out the event that we're going to have, our summer Davos, which we're going to have in early July, in Thailand, this year in Thailand, next year in Tianjin, where all these questions will be continued to be pondered at the decision level, and I hope to see some of you there.